In this video, we're headed to a hidden gem of the South. This is the International Motorsports Hall of Fame, and it's connected to the Talladega Superspeedway. It's an amazing collection of old school race cars and a few new ones too, and a lot of great history wrapped up in these buildings. A really cool experience, and it's something that I'd heard about in the past, but I had no idea how cool this was and how many vehicles were here on the property. As soon as you walk in, there's a big foyer and a gift shop, and basically you pay a few bucks, you can walk through the gate and go through a selection of buildings that are packed with amazing race cars, a lot of cool memorabilia, and a lot of information that you can soak up while you're there. It's a really cool place to see, and before you even get started on the other buildings, there's a few cars lined up outside here, and I focused on this old modified. Now this thing started life as a 30s Chevrolet sedan. Obviously it has been cut all to pieces. This thing has had tons of chassis and suspension work, and we'll see up front, this is probably like a 39 Ford or somewhere in that range, front axle and spring setup. They have obviously worked hard to make the suspension work better, but they kept that transverse leaf spring. They added some shocks over on the passenger side, and then we'll get around here, we see some widened steel wheels and some big old M&H Racemaster tires. Now these things are showing their age, but it's really cool that it has original style M&H tires on there. And then under the hood, it's a small block Chevy, tried and true. We see it's got a 4-barrel carburetor, and we do see an HEI distributor in here, which means this thing has been fooled with at least in the past 50 years or so. You can see on the inside, it's pretty much a center seat arrangement. They've done some pretty serious work to move everything to the middle. The pedals are kind of all over the place. The steering arrangement is definitely interesting in some of these old dirt track cars and round track cars. And this one's got a pretty extensive roll cage in it. Then we get around to the back, it's got a huge back bumper with some big time braces. And that was a very important part of making these old cars survive back in the day. This strengthened the frame, it obviously protected the body, and it helped them if they were bouncing off of each other or bouncing off of the wall, they could come back and race again. As we head into the first building, this is the first thing that got my attention, a 1940 Mercury sedan. Now this thing kind of looks like a street car because back in the 40s, they didn't really know what to do to make these cars faster, to make them more aerodynamic, to make them handle better. So this car essentially sits like a stock car, which is kind of the reason that these are called stock cars. Obviously, those things changed over the years, and nowadays stock cars don't look stock at all. But this is a great example, and this car actually raced at Daytona Beach in 1947. It was driven by Sam Packard, and he was one of the guys who attended the meeting, that famous meeting in Daytona where NASCAR was founded. Another cool car in this first building is this midget race car. Now these things were kind of like downsized sprint cars, and sprint cars were kind of like downsized Indy cars at this time. So these cars have a lot of cool historical influence, and they were really popular in the 1950s. These cars were absolutely fast. Some of them were driven by children, some of them were driven by adults. It was a great entry point into the racing world. And this one is a great example. It has a lot of really nice suspension work, and we'll see this one has a 2-cylinder engine. A lot of these were powered by Continental engines, and you can see some cool looking body design on this thing. Great tire and wheel combination. All of this stuff was purpose built for racing, but it ended up making a very aesthetically pleasing race car. Sitting next to it is another cool race car. This is a vintage go-kart. Now these things were available all over the country. A lot of different companies made kits that you could build yourself, or you could buy them turnkey. And a lot of these cars, this one included, used McCulloch 2-stroke engines. Now a lot of people might say that this is a chainsaw engine, and yes, you could get a chainsaw with a McCulloch engine, but these things were actually purpose built for racing go-karts. They had a lot of cool pieces on them, and this is a great example of that. The 1960s was a very important time for NASCAR. The cars were getting faster, the drivers were gaining some notoriety, and this was a great combination right here. This is a 62 Pontiac Catalina. It was driven by none other than Fireball Roberts, and this car was built and tuned by Smokey Yunick. What a combination back in the 60s. And you can even see on the inside, they started taking safety a little more seriously. This car does have a roll cage in there, and you can see they've used the original seat, but added bolsters to it to kind of keep the driver contained in there. Now, these things were not safe by any means compared to what we have today, but it was a step in the right direction. And this was a very successful combination. It had the 421 cubic inch Pontiac engine, 405 horsepower. Next up is an 81 Buick, and this car was driven by Ron Bouchard, and he was a rookie driver and ended up winning at Talladega in one of the closest races in NASCAR history, 3 wide across the line with Terry Labonte and Darrell Waltrip. It was an absolute career highlight for Ron Bouchard, and he ended up winning Rookie of the Year that year, but didn't win any more races in his NASCAR career. But this car is a great piece of that history, and it's very well preserved. Here we have a 78 Dodge Magnum, and to my knowledge, this car was never raced. It was a show car. It was driven around and hauled around to different events to be on display, and this was put together to promote the Winston Cup Series, the top series of NASCAR. This car was built by Petty Enterprises, and you can see a lot of beautiful metalwork, all those filler panels and aerodynamic tricks. All that stuff kept these cars looking like production cars, but they would cut through the air a whole lot better than they would with factory bumpers and door handles and all those factory pieces. Next up is a 74 Dodge Charger, and this one belonged to Butch Hartman. He's from Zanesville, Ohio, and this thing, again, has a lot of cool sheet metal work, and it has some amazing hand lettering. You can see this is very well preserved. Obviously, these cars got beat up and they got banged against each other and banged up against the wall, but this one looks pristine. And this car has 429 cubic inch designations on the hood. I'm not sure if that was a Hemi that was bored slightly. I'm not sure if that was maybe a 440 that was de-stroked. I don't know the history on this car, I'll be honest with you. But I do know that this was a USAC champion car, 1974 and 1976. Here's another spectacular 70s Winston Cup car. This time a 1977 Oldsmobile. Now we'll see that it is sponsored by a Chevy dealer here, but still, these Oldsmobile cars had great body lines, great horsepower back in the day, and this one was driven by Scott Stovall in 1982. He was the ARCA champion that year. This car had a banjo chassis and a 377 cubic inch Baker engine. Here's another 70s one. This is the #1 Oldsmobile, sponsored by Riverside Auto Parts in Newark, Ohio. Marvin Smith was the driver, and he was the ARCA champion in 1977 and 78. All right, now we're getting into the aero cars of the 1980s. This is the #10 Pontiac Grand Prix 2+2, and it has this very aerodynamic roof. Obviously, this isn't exactly like what you would have seen on the street cars with that 2+2 aero back glass. This one is much more round. Obviously, they did a lot of wind tunnel testing to come up with this design, and this was actually a test and research car for TRW, and it was driven by Greg Sachs. Here's another aero car from the 80s. This is the #2 Chevy Monte Carlo, driven by Grant Adcox. It was sponsored by Herb Adcox Chevrolet in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Grant won 4 straight ARCA 500s at Talladega. 3 of them were in this car. Now, unfortunately, Grant was killed in a racing accident at Atlanta Motor Speedway in 1989, but this race-winning car still lives on. It's a beautiful piece of Talladega history and Chattanooga history. And now we're moving into the 90s. We got the 94 Chevy Lumina, the #33. This was driven by Harry Gant, and this was actually his last car. He retired at the end of the 1994 season, and this is the car in as-raced condition. You can see it's got a little damage up front. This is just how this car left the track in '94. Next up is a collection of miniature race cars. First, we have a supercart with a 250cc Yamaha engine. This thing went 145 miles per hour. Then we've got a quarter midget, an 80s racing go-kart. A lot of neat stuff to see here. Throughout the museum, there's a lot of great Darrell Waltrip cars, and this is the first one we came across. This is an 86 Chevy Monte Carlo. We'll see that Budweiser and KFC sponsorship. Really cool looking paint job. And you can see this is when these cars started getting a little more aerodynamic. The roof lines are not exactly stock. You can see a ton of sheet metal work done to these cars, but they still look like a street car at first glance. Next up is an unusual one. This is an 88 Pontiac Sunbird. Now, some of these smaller cars ran in other NASCAR sanctioned classes and all sorts of sportsman style races all over the country. And this one was driven by Shauna Robinson, and she was the first woman to ever win a NASCAR sanctioned event. This center section of the first building is packed with cool cars, and we pan over here to the number 71 Dodge Charger. This was sponsored by K&K Insurance, and this was the car driven by Bobby Isaac. He won the 1970 NASCAR Championship, but this was the short track style car, and we can see that this doesn't have the pointy nose, this doesn't have the big wing on the back, this doesn't even have the bubble style back glass. This has the original style Charger back glass. These cars had the 426 cubic inch Hemi, absolutely dominant combination back in 1970, and this car won that championship and continued racing in 1971. Now, this museum being located in Alabama, there's a ton of Allison racing history. Bobby Allison, Donnie Allison, and of course Davey Allison. This first one is an 88 Ford Thunderbird. Really cool looking body on these cars, cool paint, cool lettering, a lot of great details here. And then sitting next to it is a miniature version, a little go-kart with that Thunderbird body and 28 graphics. And behind it is the later Ford Thunderbird. This is the 89 and up Ford Thunderbird body, which made a great looking Winston Cup car. And obviously this paint, this is iconic for the late 80s and early 90s. Black paint with those bright letters, bright graphics. This is a great looking car, and it is beautifully restored. As we head into another building, we've got Tiny Lund's 1964 Ford Galaxy. Now, these were big, heavy cars, but they also had big horsepower. 427 cubic inch, big Ford engine, and this thing has a great look to it. It has widened steel wheels. You can see that side exhaust. Has a few little body modifications like for that fuel filler, but for the most part, this looked like a car you could get at the dealership. Now we got a little bit of drag racing action and a really cool display of John Force Racing cars. So the first one we're looking at is John Force's Chevy Camaro funny car. It's got the body down, so you don't see a lot of details there, but you can see that aerodynamic body. It looks nothing like a Camaro, but this is the status of funny car racing for the last 20 or 30 years. Sitting next to it is his daughter's Top Fuel dragster. This is Brittany Force's Top Fuel dragster, and they always perform well. John Force Racing has been known for having great crew chiefs, great drivers, great crew that work on the cars each and every day and while they're at the track. These cars are absolutely dominating performers. They've won races, they've won championships, they've set records, and they continue to do so. The last car in the John Force lineup is his other daughter, Ashley Force. Back when she used to race funny cars, this was her Ford Mustang funny car. And obviously there's nothing Ford about this engine right here. So the body, that was made to be like a Ford Mustang, and that was for sponsorship purposes. But underneath that body is all custom. Now, these engines are loosely based off of an old Chrysler Hemi, but these things are completely custom, 100% custom blocks, pistons. Every piece of these engines are custom. Huge supercharger and injector hat. These things make 8,000 horsepower and absolutely pound the ground. They shake the earth when they're running. Really cool to see these things and get an up close and personal look right up here and see what these things are made of. Now, it would be hard to pick a favorite out of this entire museum, but these two Camaros really got my attention. Now, these cars have a really wild looking body. They have a wedge chopped top. They have a wild looking front end, big humps over the front tires. These things were really unique. These were called Superspeedway Modifieds, and they had a little nickname for it. They were called the Mod Squad. These cars started in 1974. They started running modifieds at big racetracks like Daytona. You can see right here, this is Neil Bonnett's car. It has a really cool looking body shape to it, big tires all the way around, and these things performed extremely well. In fact, they actually had to slow these cars down with chicanes and by doing road course areas. So this was pretty short-lived. These cars were built in 1977, and the rules package was extremely loose. The car behind Neil Bonnett's car, this is Richie Evans' car. Really good job of fabricating these cars and making them look aggressive, but still having that relatability that we all know and love. Now, here's a cool one. This is Bill Elliott's number 9 Coors Ford Thunderbird, and this car made history at Talladega because it made the fastest lap in history for a NASCAR Winston Cup car. This thing ran 212.229 miles per hour on May 1st, 1986, setting a record that will likely never be broken again. Now, you can't have a Motorsports Hall of Fame without having some sort of Dale Earnhardt tribute, and we've got the black number 3 Intimidator right here, the Mr. Goodwrench sponsored car. This is a really nice representation of his most famous days toward the end of his career, and we'll see, panning over, we've got the Dale Earnhardt Jr. number 8 car, and this one was really special because this is the baseball car. This is the 2001 Daytona 500 winning car. Now, it was reskinned and repainted. It has the traditional Budweiser theme here, but this car has tons of history, tons of really good wins at Daytona and at Talladega, and it even has the special message that was left to Dale Earnhardt Jr. from Stevie Waltrip. That's Darrell Waltrip's wife, and this means a lot to the history of this car. It's amazing that it's right here in place on a very iconic car from the early 2000s. The era wars of 1969 and 1970 were amazing. I wasn't around to see it firsthand, but these cars tell the whole story. 1969 Dodge Daytona and the 1970 Plymouth Superbird, these cars had a pointy nose, big giant wing on the back, and a lot of other aerodynamic tricks. And these things didn't last long. NASCAR changed the rules to where it kind of pushed these cars out, and other aerodynamic tricks came into play. But these things are a piece of NASCAR history, and this one was driven by the legendary Buddy Baker. Now, here's something I didn't expect to see at the International Motorsports Hall of Fame. This is a land speed racer, a streamliner, 39 feet long and 20 inches wide. Obviously, it's shaped like a missile, and that driver's compartment is extremely small, and the engine compartment, even though it's extremely small, it has a huge Cadillac V8, an old school Cadillac V8 with twin turbos and an air-shifted Liberty 5-speed transmission that propelled this car in September of 2010 to 408 mile per hour flying mile with a 415 mile an hour exit speed. Amazing speed for a car with old school horsepower in terms of the actual engine itself. This car sold on Bring a Trailer back in 2020 for $175,000, and it probably cost multiple times that to build this thing. Here's another land speed car, and another car I did not expect to see. This is the Budweiser Rocket car, and again, 39 feet long, 20 inches wide. This is a wild looking car, and you can see this car sits up where the other one sat right on the ground. You couldn't even see the tires or wheels. This one sits up, and you can see these fabricated aluminum wheels. These are solid aluminum wheels on here, no tires whatsoever. This car set some big time records, and it is unbelievable that it's so well preserved. So an interesting detail is that this car was owned by Hal Needham. That's the guy who was the director for Smokey and the Bandit and a lot of other great movies. He owned this car, and this thing is a work of art. And next to it, there was a board that showed some of the details. And I'm not really up to speed on rocket cars and land speed racing, but I'll read off some of the details. So this is a 4,430 pound car. It has 48,000 horsepower, and that's from a V4 hydrogen peroxide rocket, and it has an extra 12,000 horsepower Sidewinder missile. This is wild and crazy stuff. This car goes 0 to 140 miles per hour in 1 second, 400 miles per hour in 3 seconds, and on December 17th, 1979, it went 739.666 miles per hour at the Edwards Air Force Base. Next up, we got an old sprint car, and this thing is beautifully restored. We can see a great looking body on these cars. This era of sprint car racing, these bodies were hand formed. Sometimes they would have a fiberglass rear section, but still very beautiful and stylish cars. And we can see this one is painted very nicely. It's got louvers on the hood. It's got that hand formed track nose, and then a lot of great suspension details. We can see it has dual lever action shocks on the back. It has magnesium wheels. It has some cool vintage racing tires. These are not reproductions. And we can see it actually has a stagger setup on this car. This one has an M&H 820-15 on the left side, and then a Firestone 716 on the right side. Now here's a really cool piece from the glory days of IndyCar racing. This is a 1956 Curtis Indy Roadster. This thing was powered by a Novi engine, and it had only 167.6 cubic inches. It was supercharged, 8 cylinders, and it made 765 horsepower. This car was owned by Andy Granatelli, and this was the Studebaker STP Special. Now, Andy Granatelli worked for Studebaker at the time, and this was no way a Studebaker car. This was a completely custom fabricated race car. It was a 4-wheel drive Indy car, and this thing had tons of exotic parts and pieces inside and out, and it's a beautiful car. The paint colors, the stance, the tire and wheel setup on these cars from the 50s and 60s, and then that fin on the back just really adds to the wow factor of this car. Next up, we got some Darrell Waltrip action. First, we've got the number 11 Pepsi Challenger Monte Carlo, that timeless Pepsi Challenger paint scheme that we saw through all sorts of different racing. We saw Don Perdome run this same type of paint scheme on his funny car, this yellow and white with the Pepsi logo. It's iconic, it's burned into our memories as one of the coolest paint jobs ever, but it's upstaged, at least in my opinion, by this next car, which was the number 88 Gatorade car. Now this car has hand-painted details, beautiful lettering on this thing, and it was definitely unique compared to the other cars of the era. Here's another cool one. This is a 74 Dodge Charger, and this is a Richard Petty car. You can see that STP paint job, and it's actually showing its age a little bit. Some of those stripes are starting to fade a little bit, and that tells you this is a true survivor from the 1970s. This next section of the museum had a little bit of everything, some street cars, some race cars, and this wooden body. This is an AC Cobra, and I don't know if this was like a buck that was used for forming metal or if this was some experiment. I don't know what this was, but it is beautifully sculpted, a beautiful piece, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about it. Then as we pan around this room, we've got the Dick Trickle number 90 Winston Cup car, and then behind it is a Panoz Road Racer. These things are truly exotic. A lot of cool stuff underneath that very unique body. And then behind it is a Dodge Stratus race car, a front-wheel drive race car, another road racing piece. And then next to it is a very unique car. This is a 1981 Buick Regal pace car. This was a pace car for the Indy 500, and this was a touring parade car that promoted Union 76. So this is a completely custom build outside of the Indy 500 pace car builds. This thing has a custom top, and you can see the paint is starting to show its age, but this thing is truly 100% original. Next, we got a 33 Chevy Coupe called the Orange Blossom Special. This car was raced on dirt tracks in Texas in the 1960s, and it's been restored. You can see beautiful shiny paint, brand new lettering. Everything is looking good on this car, and it's powered by a Chevy inline 6-cylinder. Moving on down the line, we've got Kenny Schrader's 1985 Ford Thunderbird Modified. These cars always get my attention because they still look like a Thunderbird, but they've got that really cool open wheel design. Good looking race cars for back in the 80s. I always love looking at the tires and wheels on some of these old cars, and this is another cool example. Widened steel wheels, old M&H tires, and this looks like maybe a 33 or 34 Ford sedan as we back up and get a good look at it. These cars were really cool looking as street cars, but they were extra cool as race cars. And you can see the doors have been welded up, and not only were they welded up, they were smoothed. You don't see any seams, you don't see any kind of welds or anything like that. Somebody really slicked this car out. And this car has a center-ish seating arrangement. You can see it's kind of in the center, and they've made the steering wheel just over there. They didn't put an offset box or a Schrader type steering box or anything like that. They just moved the steering column over. And then under the hood, this car has a 292 cubic inch small block Chevy with 3 Rochester carburetors. And you can see on this car, major tire stagger, big time difference on the left to the right, big old bumper on the front, big rocker panel bars. This car was ready for action, and it was campaigned by Tommy, Bobby, and Steve Gober. Up next is a weird one, and it's probably the only time you're ever going to see an electric vehicle on my channel. This is a 77 Fiat XDH1, and this car held a speed record of 67.645 miles per hour at Talladega, and it was driven by Marty Robbins. At that point, it had 20 die-hard batteries, just standard car batteries, They later changed to a Sears electric vehicle battery and climbed Pikes Peak in a time of 32 minutes, 7.42 seconds. Up next is a pretty standard issue hot rod. We got a 41 Ford convertible. It has a flathead, Offenhauser aluminum heads, 3 carburetors, the regular routine there under the hood. And as we back up, this car is showing its age just a little bit, needs a little bit of detail work and maybe a new fresh set of wide white wall tires, but still a really cool car. Stuffed back here in the corner is an 84 Dodge Daytona Turbo Z. Now this car was pretty cool because it had some pretty legendary drivers, and it went 133.400 miles per hour in the flying mile. Next we got John Utzman's car. This guy was from Kingsport, Tennessee area and had some serious horsepower with a Robert Yates Ford engine. This thing won a lot of races and it looks cool too. Now we got another old school one. This is Jay Mitchell's Ford sedan. You can see the bottom has been cut off of this car. They've opened up the wheel wells. Obviously the fenders are gone, the hood sides, all that original Ford sheet metal is long gone, and this thing is just a down and dirty race car. You can see it has a Ford inline 6-cylinder engine. It's got wide 5 hubs, extra wide tires on this car. A cool looking combination, but I'm not sure exactly what era this car ran in. Now we're moving into another section of the museum, and there's a really cool engine room here. A lot of cool stuff to look at, including a 1956 Cadillac 365 engine. These things made 285 horsepower. And then in front of it is a 1957 Oldsmobile J2 Rocket. These were 371 cubic inches, 300 horsepower, and this J2 combination won the 1957 Daytona 500. They had this really nicely detailed Franklin quick change rear end on display, and then a tried and true small block Chevy. Now this thing is show car slick. It's got 3 chrome Rochester carburetors on there, backed by a 4-speed. And then on the other side of the room is a Ford flathead V8, Edelbrock cylinder heads. These are absolutely beautiful representations of old school horsepower. Now we're headed into another room, and this one has a lot of cool history, especially from the Alabama gang. So here we've got Davey Allison's Battlestar car. This was raced in 1987, and this thing had great success at Dover, Michigan, and Rockingham. Unfortunately, this car was wrecked in Atlanta in 1988, but it was restored by Robert Yates Racing in 1989. Now here's a pretty cool one. This is Bobby Allison's number 12 AMC Matador. Now you don't often hear about the AMCs as far as high performance cars, but they had some serious engines. Now this car raced for quite a few years under Bobby Allison, and he actually drove it to 4 Winston Cup wins. Next up we got Donnie Allison's number 27 Ford Torino Talladega. Now the Talladega body style with that swoopy nose and the fast back and some of those other aero tricks, that was the answer to the Dodge Daytona and the Plymouth Superbird. These cars were absolutely killer as far as aerodynamics and horsepower is concerned. This car won at Charlotte, but oddly enough did not race at Talladega due to the driver's boycott about tire safety. Next up is Red Farmer's 1972 Ford Torino. Now, this car finished 4th at Talladega in 1972, and that was Red Farmer's highest finish in the top series. Finishing out this row is the number 12 Monte Carlo, sponsored by Budweiser and KFC, and this was Neil Bonnet, legendary racer who eventually became a commentator, but unfortunately lost his life in a racing accident. All right, now this one isn't a race car, but it has some serious racing history. This is a GMC panel truck, and you can see on the side of it, it has that Offenhauser logo on the panel area, but the really cool lettering here is the Rocco and Cheaters Speed Shop lettering on the door. This thing was bought new for Rocco's and Cheaters Speed Shop. These guys were legends in Alabama. They were based out of Birmingham. They sold race parts to all the big guys and even the little guys too. These guys were cool. The shop stayed in business until 2007, and occasionally they'll open the place up and sell some of the remaining inventory. It's truly a piece of Alabama racing history. Here we have another Neil Bonnet car, this time a 64 Chevelle. Now this thing's got a slick body on it. You'll see the paint is looking really good. This car was owned by Butch Nelson of B&H Motors in Birmingham. It had a 360 cubic inch combination, and the car was called the Underdog. Now I've always heard about Davey Allison, but I didn't realize he had a brother who also raced. This is Clifford Allison's 1992 Buick, which raced in ARCA and the Busch Series. Now, unfortunately, Clifford died as a result of a crash at Michigan just 11 months before his brother Davey died in a helicopter crash. All right, now we got some drag cars to talk about, and the first one that got my attention is this 66 Chevelle Super Sport 396 car, and this thing was a super stock D car. It was raced by Ray Owen from 1966 to 1968, where he competed in 692 races and won 676 of those races. You can see this car has tons of hand-lettered details on there, performance products, paint by Mickey Noble. Then on the back it says Jerry Dean Union 76 and Joe Dean New and Used Auto Parts. Now that Jerry Dean, that's the same one that runs Superstock in Southeast Gassers today. So pretty cool tie in there. And then on the quarter windows we see old school decals from Hooker Headers, Rocco and Cheaters, and Honest Charlie. And then this car just has a cool look with those skinny slots on the front, the solid looking wheels on the back. I'm not sure what those even are. Just a really good looking combination. The paint is extremely well preserved. You can see all of that lettering, and even on the deck lid it says the most wanted list, and they had a list of all these racers' names from the area. This car was a dominating force in the 60s, and somehow, some way, it still lives on today looking just like it did. Here's another Chevelle, this time a 65, called Mom's Toy. And the reason for that name is this car was raced by Cleo Chandler, and she didn't start racing until she was 68 years old. And she was the mom of Ed Chandler, a very well-known drag racer in Alabama. And they raced cars together for years, and this Mom's Toy Chevelle was a dominating car. It raced in the ICM category, and that is for a crate motor. So the range of ET this car ran was a 10 flat to a 1049, and this car actually won the 1992 IHRA Winter Nationals in Darlington, and she continued to race until she was 81 years old. Sitting next to that Chevelle is Ed Chandler's dragster. Now, this thing ran in the top dragster class back in the day, and you can see this thing has a killer small block Chevy with mechanical fuel injection, of course those gold Moroso valve covers. This is a championship winning car, a record setting car, and it's really cool that it's on display here with his mom's car. Now here's an interesting one. This is the world's fastest closed course pickup. In August of 1976, this truck went around Talladega and averaged 124.304 miles per hour. Lee Hurley was the driver, and Charlie Nations was the builder of this really wild, long wheelbase Chevrolet pickup truck. Moving on, we got a collection of engines here, and this says this is the first successful overhead cam V8 Ford from 1937. We'll see that it has some very crudely cast aluminum parts here. It says Smullen on the valve cover, or I guess in this case that's the cam cover, because this is an overhead cam engine. It has a wild looking induction setup, and then behind it is a Pontiac. That's what it says right there. Even though this is based off of a small block Chevy, this is an aluminum Pontiac small block, and then next to it is another Pontiac, which is based off of Chevy, big block with a big supercharger, huge fuel injection setup, really wild looking combination. Next up we got the crash area, and there are 4 absolutely mutilated Winston Cup cars here, and all of these drivers walked away from these crashes, which is a testament to the safety requirements during the 1980s and 90s. And the first car we're looking at here is Mike Harmon's car. We got Michael Waltrip's car back there in the back. Ricky Craven had a really bad accident. You can see the remains of that car. And then Neil Bonnett's car right here. This is the number 31 car that he was basically borrowing from Dale Earnhardt. Now, he wrecked this car bad, but walked away from this crash and unfortunately had another bad crash the next year and passed away from it. Next is a cool cutaway car, which is always fun to see some of the details inside of these cars. And then we've got a Red Farmer late model car, and then a winged modified car that's got some cool parts and pieces on it. It has magnesium wheels with some Goodyear racing tires. That's old school stuff. And then under the hood is a small block Chevy with a tunnel ram. You don't often see a tunnel ram on a dirt track or a round track car, but it looks cool here. Of course, those zoomy headers probably made a bunch of noise. Next up is sort of a pit stop display area, and it uses Bobby Allison's number 12 Miller High Life Buick. Here's another Bobby Allison car, this time the Miller American Buick, and you can see this one has a very unique top. This one doesn't look like a production car. It looks like something that's been fabricated, and it was sort of in that transition from the boxy cars of the 80s to the more swoopy and aerodynamic cars of the 90s. All right, that's it from the International Motorsports Hall of Fame in Talladega, Alabama. This was an extremely cool stop with a ton of cool history, round track racing, Indy racing, land speed racing, drag racing, and everything in between. It was a great place. This is honestly one of the hidden gems of the South. This museum has tons of cool stuff to look at and a lot of information to soak in. It's definitely worth your time. You got to check this place out.